Palace of Justice in Paris saw towards the end of last summer the trial of a man whose destiny paralleled the destiny of France. Marshal Petain had been one of the great generals and heroes of the war that ended in 1918. The people who crowded the Palace of Justice for his trial had once held him in their highest esteem as a soldier and a patriot. The marshal was tried for his life on a charge of intelligence with the enemy. The surroundings of a French court are different from those of a court in the United States, but the purposes and the ends of the court are the same. Newspaper men watching the arrivals at the palace saw 3 judges and 24 jurors. 12 of the jurors were former members of Parliament, and the trial itself had been preceded by a long examination of the prisoner. For the view from his rooms in Vichy, where he had ruled France for 2 years, the marshal exchanged a barred window and the view of a deep courtyard. The greatest French legal talent waited to examine the prisoner. Newspaper men representing readers from all over the world filled the press benches, and all the premiers who had ruled France in the dark years before the war had been called to testify. Petain entered the court wearing the uniform of a marshal with a single decoration. His mustache was neatly clipped. He had the complexion of a man who had been well fed. He was 89 years old. He had come there, he said, only to vindicate his honor. Solicitor General Mornay, the man who had convicted Mata Hari in the last war, wanted to question more than the old man's honor. Why had he, Petain, spoken publicly of Germany's crusade for civilization? Why had he been unwilling to fight Germany? Why had he humiliated France? Why had he refused to help the English? Why had he learned of the Allied landings in North Africa with stupefaction and sorrow? Why had he, above all, surrendered the French armies to the enemy? Attorney for the defense Isorni said that the marshal would make no plea for mercy, a noble sentiment that was met coldly by witnesses of a younger who had seen the marshal's code of honor in terms of crematoriums, torture instruments, hunger, and disgrace. Former Premier Daladier added to the picture of an old man who had used his prestige, his blue eyes, and his personality for the defeat of his own country. Former Premier Renaud said that the greatest mistake of his life had been his faith in Petain. He said that he despised the marshal. Petain's defense was that while he outwardly collaborated with the Germans, he had wanted in his heart to help the Allies. His remarks were hissed, and feeling ran so high that several advocates had to be evicted from the courtroom. The despicable Laval, who had been extradited from Spain, testified in the marshal's defense. As the bulk of the evidence began to take shape, it became clear that more than the trial of an old man, this was the trial of a class, a nation, a way of thinking. It was a way of thinking, as former Premier Léon Blum said, that had led France into a nightmare of fear. It was a way of thinking based on indifference to defeat, and that secret hope that out of defeat would spring an authoritarian state that would abolish labor unions, discriminate against minorities, lower wages, and secure the privileges of the rich. It was a way of thinking that surrendered the nation of France to the enemy and left the country a physical and spiritual ruin. It was a way of thinking for which the old marshal was tried, and he was sentenced to death. General de Gaulle commuted the sentence to imprisonment for life, and it will be in a prison on an island off the coast of France that someday the old marshal and his way of thinking will die.
For thousands of years, practically since the world began, we've had peace and war. Peace and war. We marked out boundaries and went to war to change them. We developed trade and fought over it. We invented machines and put guns on them. And every time peace got its feet on the ground, another war blew the hell out of it. Today, we have another chance for peace. Maybe the last chance. Well, what have we done about it? 50 nations who want peace got together. They formed the United Nations Organization. Purpose? To stop wars. To see how this organization is going to work, let's take a couple of countries. Call them Highland and Lowland. Suppose Highland is arguing with Lowland about a boundary. In this United Nations setup, they'll take their argument to the General Assembly. And here, in front of all the other countries in the world, Highland and Lowland will sound off with their complaints. The other countries give them advice or criticism, try to get the problem straightened out. But suppose after hearing the arguments, the General Assembly decides that this is a job for legal specialists. In this case, they take their legal tangle to the International Court. There, the judges dig into the evidence and hand down a decision. But countries have other problems. They get into economic trouble, business jams. The factories in one country and the raw materials in another can lead to all sorts of fights over trade. Price arguments, shipping problems, taxes, trade laws, money value, and other tangles can get trade relations between countries all snarled up. This kind of question is one for the Economic and Social Council, an outfit set up especially to handle this sort of thing. This council sends a committee to study the raw materials of Lowland and the industries of Highland, and then suggest ways for them to get together and do business without scrapping. Most countries can settle their disputes peacefully, because all the other countries of the world will insist on peaceful settlement. But suppose a country doesn't want to play ball. Suppose it starts arming, making threats. Then the United Nations has a powerful last resort. The Security Council is set up to guarantee peace by force, if necessary. If the Big Five, Britain, China, France, Russia, and the United States, and 2 of the 6 other nations on this council decide that a country is hell-bent for trouble, they step in and say, look, either you settle this peacefully, or we'll settle it for you. But if a warning isn't enough, if a country keeps right on making trouble, then the Security Council isolates him, cuts off his trade and communications. And if this doesn't stop him, the Council can shoot the works, calling on the other United Nations for armed force to stop the fight. The United Nations Organization is a working plan for peace. 50 nations have decided to put war out of business. This plan may not be perfect. It's still open for improvements. But it is a chance for peace. And up to now, it's the best chance we've ever had.
There are lots of nice places in the world. I could live with considerable pleasure in the Pacific Northwest, or in New England, or in the Mississippi Gulf Coast, or in Key West, California, or Honolulu. But there's only one of me. I can't live in all those places. So if you can only have one house, then it has to be in New Mexico.
Those are Ernie Pyle's words. This is his street. This is his house. Couldn't miss it in a million years. Same old white picket fence, pinon and juniper bushes in the yard, workshop in the back. That girl, my guiding star, he called her. His dog, the shepherd, Cheetah. Inside the house, the things he enjoyed. Ernie Pyle loved these comforts. But in 1940, he confessed a small voice came in the night and said, "Go." So he went. All the farmers, lumberjacks, bartenders he used to write about were now soldiers, and Ernie had to follow them. He followed them through everything he hated, through long marches, bitter cold, homesickness, and fear. He said there were a lot of heels in the world, and they had to be licked before he and his friends could return to the familiar land they left behind. Ernie's special land was his adopted state of New Mexico. He'd been through this state, every inch of it, and he knew it and missed it. He knew and missed Santa Fe, with its Capitol building where politicians argue in English and in Spanish, with its old Palace of Governors, over which the flags of Spain, Mexico, the Confederacy, and the United States have flown. Taos, quaint village to the north, where ancient pueblos gave New York City its idea for modern skyscrapers, where artists sit all day painting, and where that great frontier scout, Kit Carson, who taught us many tricks we use against the Japs, lies buried. Gallup, that quiet little town, now the center of a booming wartime coal industry. Roswell, modern city, and home of the New Mexico Military Institute, where tomorrow's soldiers learn to march. Silver City, flourishing in the foothills of the Rockies, flourishing as a result of this, silver and lead and zinc, scooped out of the earth for the war. Carlsbad Caverns, where visitors come to see one of the wonders of the world, where school kids come to sing Rock of Ages. All these places in New Mexico, Ernie Pyle knew and liked. But most of all, he liked just the ordinary, simple things of home, and he liked them unchanged. In his words, these are the things he loved and fought to save.
We like it here because our front yard stretches as far as you can see. And the distance sort of gets into your soul and makes you feel that you, too, are big inside. We like it because you can take a Sunday afternoon spin into the mountains. And along the way, you can see people picnicking. Other days, we like to get down on the desert early and see sunrises so violently beautiful, they're almost frightening. A half-hour's drive from home is the Indian reservation, Isleta. The old men work long hours in the fields, while the women take care of the adobe homes and bake in ancient clay ovens. This is a special occasion, Corpus Christi Day. Outside the church, Father Shaw leads a prayer for those in uniform, while inside, a Pueblo mother lights a candle for her son overseas. Sometimes we like to drive out and watch the Rio Grande flowing across the state. Here, 400 years ago, the Spaniards came looking for the 7 cities of gold and instead founded Sleepy Sandoval. But it's not all sleepy. Here, the Spanish Americans work. Here, they play. Sometimes we like to travel southeast to visit a sheep ranch. This man is one of 3,000 owners. 6 times as many sheep as people in New Mexico. The lambs are sent out to graze and fatten, and then they're clipped. The wool becomes government issue. But above all, we like living back in Albuquerque because, well, when our friends send us letters asking about the place, we get the letters in a country mailbox instead of in a slot in the door. And we like it here because of the informality. You can do almost anything you want to. Well, within reason. We like it because people are friendly and interested in you, yet they leave you alone. Still, you don't suffer from over-isolation, for people here, too, live lives that are complete and full. They make grand slams. They make Sunday cakes. They make landscapes beautiful. And they make it legal. There's no famine of thought in our surroundings. Everyone reads the Tribune or the Journal. There are movies, English, Spanish. There's the State University. We like it here because there are all kinds of people, and they get along. Harold Hubble, sheriff after serving with the 200th Coast Artillery on Bataan in '42. Clyde Tingley, mayor for 28 years, Navajo Indian. Rancher, muchacho, and muchacha. Big chief and his tribe. But New Mexico, like everywhere else, has felt the war. Here, too, are women waiting for their men to come back, listening for any word of their sons and husbands who are away. Women who lost a whole National Guard regiment to the Japs after Pearl Harbor. Women waiting. Loving New Mexico is like being in love with those women. You don't love a woman because she wears number 3 shoes or eats left-handed. You love her because you love her. And that's the way we are about the Southwest. And that's why I can't help but feel bad about leaving. Being with the American soldiers has been a rich experience. To the thousands of them I know personally, and the hundreds of thousands for whom I've had the humble privilege of being a sort of mouthpiece. This, then, is to say goodbye. And good luck.